Welcome to Just Break Up, the podcast about love, heartbreak, and all the relationship advice you don't want to hear. My name is Sierra DeMulder.
And I'm Sam Blackwell, and today we're going to answer a letter from somebody who needs help cleaning. But before we begin, we just want to give you our Surgeon General's warning, which is that Sierra and I are not licensed mental health practitioners. Important in this one, I think, especially.
Yeah, definitely.
We're going to be talking about ADHD, so...
Yeah. We are not professionals. We are not trained in any of this. So please take our advice as you see fit. We're only here to offer our humble musings to hopefully shed some understanding and maybe some laughs about the incredibly rewarding but mostly confusing experience that is love.
All right, let's get into today's letter. Today's letter comes from Neat Freak, whose pronouns are she, her, who is writing from my ADHD tornado brain. I, queer, she, her, have been with my amazing partner, he, him, for nearly 5 years, and we have lived together for nearly 2 years now. Our relationship is wonderful, full of adventure, quality time, and deep, deep love for each other. I am very confident that I want to spend the rest of my life with him, and I know that he feels the same way. Now, here comes the difficulty. I was diagnosed with ADHD about 2 years ago, around when we moved in together. This was a relatively late in life ADHD diagnosis, my mid-20s, which seems to be ever too common for women. The past 2 years since my diagnosis have been full of my personal growth, learning to understand myself better, be kinder to myself, and beginning medication, which has helped me with many things immensely. One part of my life that my ADHD diagnosis has helped me understand is overstimulation. Now that I have the words for this, I can see that I have struggled with this throughout my life, the occasional feeling of my surroundings overwhelming me to the point where I can't regulate myself anymore. When this happens, my brain is telling me that I need to fix everything all at once to feel better, but my body feels stuck, like I can't figure out what to start with since everything feels like such a high priority. I have only recently been able to put words to these feelings, so for a long time, I thought that this was just regular old anxiety until my therapist helped me figure out that this was an ADHD thing. Something that can really set this off for me is our apartment being cluttered and messy. Another wonderful, sarcasm, LOL, part of my ADHD is that I tend to start doing a million projects at once and can't keep up with how fast my brain is moving to prevent everything from becoming a mess. My partner is a lot less affected by our apartment being messy than I am, so this is okay for him. And I've always maintained that it's my responsibility to clean up after myself since I can be such a tornado sometimes. I also think it's important to qualify this by saying that the mess I'm referring to isn't actually very messy. Our apartment is overall pretty clean, but it can feel cluttered pretty quickly since we live in a small apartment without much storage space, and I like to do a lot of projects/crafts/building. But lately, I've been feeling like I need more help. I had a conversation with my partner yesterday about how I have been feeling unable to keep my messes below the threshold where they will drive me to overstimulation. I asked him to put in some more effort to be able to identify when our place is getting to the point where I'm going to feel this way and to be more proactive to help me avoid it. We had a long talk about this. In short, he felt a bit hurt that I didn't feel like he was doing this already, but understands where I'm coming from and is willing to try. But we just don't know what to try. When I'm overstimulated, I get in my head and already have a hard time figuring out what is bothering me and how to prioritize fixing it. And being able to express it out loud is especially difficult since I can't even get it organized in my own brain. I know that this isn't his responsibility to feel the same urgency for cleaning and tidying as me, but I am also really struggling with feeling overstimulated in our own home lately, and it feels like something needs to change. I would so appreciate hearing any of your thoughts/ideas on this. Much love. Thank you.
All right, my darling. Thank you so much for writing and trusting us with this question. I think it's a great question that many of our listeners will relate to. And I was really grateful for your personal explanation. I was really grateful for your personal description and explanation of your experience and your description of your relationship to your ADHD before and after it was diagnosed. I think that will also be really helpful for some people. We're going to talk about strategies that we have applied to our own lives. We're going to talk about how to, have some compassion and grace for yourself in this learning process of the self, right? And hopefully give you a couple resources that makes this journey a bit easier. But first, we're going to take a very quick break.
All right, everyone, welcome back. I echo what Sierra said, which is that I'm just really appreciative of you telling us about your experience with ADHD and also hearing about some of the things that you're trying when it comes to navigating the way that ADHD is affecting your brain and your relationship and your life. I think it's really great that you are trying to think about how to be proactive about helping yourself regulate when you become overstimulated. And I also really appreciate that your partner is sort of hearing and seeing your experience with your ADHD and saying, yeah, let me help, right? And I also really, really appreciate, I think it's really interesting, the piece that you talked about where, you talked to him about sometimes I feel overstimulated in our apartment and I need your help figuring out how to get myself back. And he was like, I'm trying to do that, and you're not seeing it, which I think is just really interesting. And I think part of my advice for you as you're thinking about how to move forward and what do you want to try is how can you pay more attention to the signs and signals that your partner is trying to give you about his knowing what's happening for you? How can you, in those moments of dysregulation or even before those moments of dysregulation, kind of see and hear when he's trying to tell you, hey, I think we're on a path to this thing. And what does he need to do to be more explicit about the fact that that's what he's trying to do for you? And I think it's how do you come up with even code words or safe words for each other about what is the thing that we say when he's noticing that there's 7 different projects out and that you're getting kind of activated around it so that you can hear, oh, maybe I need help cleaning up the things, right? Is it that he's hey, I'm noticing that you're getting started on something else over here and there's 3 other things that you've been working on that are still out. I know that makes you feel activated. So I just want to name that is something that I'm noticing, right? Maybe that's the thing. Or maybe he needs to explicitly be hey, before you start on that thing, you've got 3 other projects going on. Do you want to clean them up, right? What's the way that he can say it that's going to be able to make it known to you? And that can be as indirect as you need it to be, or it could be as direct as you need it to be. Hey, there's 7 different projects out. Should we clean some of this stuff up, right? That. But I think that asking for what you need in order to be able to hear it when you're on the path to being overstimulated or when you're already overstimulated is something that you two are going to have to talk about. And I think inviting him into that language is going to be really helpful for you.
I think that's really helpful. I also want to share some thoughts and strategies that I've applied to my life. And recently I have started noticing, I don't know if I'm experiencing overstimulation or something, a cousin of that, but I've really started thinking about my needs a little bit differently. I've started to think about, I'm trying to take a step back, and instead of looking at my need or my desire, here's a surface level example. I often be oh, I'd love to work out today. Or I'd love to do a YouTube workout or go for a run. But I can't always effectively do that in one day. I can't always get myself to do it. And so my whole life I've been man, you just gotta want it more. You just gotta prioritize it more.
Sure.
And in my mind, I'm okay, so prioritizing is in my day. I have to just be okay, I want to do this. In my mind,
Uh-huh.
And I'm realizing that the things that I want in my life, it's not actually about focusing on the actual things. It's finding the barriers, the often intangible, minute barriers that stand between us and completing the goal or the thing that we want, that we know would be good for us. For example, it's often literally one of the most embarrassing barriers of me in working out is I don't want to change my clothes. I don't want to put my gym clothes on. You know what I mean? I'm already dressed for the day. Maybe I should just start my day wearing my gym clothes or whatever. So I've been trying to find the barriers between me and things that I want to do in my life that I know are caretaking acts for myself. I'm literally going to put my gym clothes out for me, put them out the night before so that I know they're right there, so that I know there's one less barrier between me and putting on those clothes. They're already picked out. They're already there. A huge resource that I'm suggesting, that I want to suggest to you, that I kind of got this idea from, is the book, How to Keep a House While Drowning. It's super popular. I shouted it out a couple months ago, and it was actually written by a therapist who didn't know she had ADHD when she wrote the book. So it's sort of these like hard-earned life hacks that she had built for herself. And she is super compassionate and shame-free in her language. She is all about meeting yourself where you're at, and identifying what are the concrete, tangible, and intangible barriers between you, and how can we cut some of those barriers out or make less resistance? How can we have a couple tricks up our sleeve to get us around, depending on how well you're functioning that day, or whether or not you're stimulated, or whether or not you're in a project or not. And like another trick for how, like that I got from her, but that I did intuitively in my own house, now that I have a toddler and all of her shit is everywhere. Like, we have baskets in every room. So when there are 300 toys scattered across my living room floor, and I want to tidy because it's making me feel overwhelmed, and I can't really get to my brain, my decision making when my house feels really cluttered, we just scoop those toys up and we throw them in a basket. Doesn't matter if there are mismatching puzzle pieces in one big basket. I can organize them later when I have time. But I know that there are these cheat code, quick ways for me to make my house appear less overwhelming visually, literally, because that's what it is for me. So even if you want to do more than one project at the same time, can you thrift or buy storage containers so that you can like keep the projects in a box that you can put a lid on? Like, literally, containers are like make my life feel more manageable, even though the same stuff is there on the shelf. It's just in a box now.
For sure.
Instead of being open on the shelf,
It's wild how much like putting things behind doors is like, yes. You know what I mean? It's like still a mess in there, but at least like there's a barrier between my eyeballs and the mess that exists, and my brain can relax knowing that.
The book, again, is called How to Keep a House While Drowning by Casey Davis. And the subtitle is A Gentle Approach to Cleaning and Organizing. I know that it's very popular in the ADHD world. So you might have known about it already, but I just want to add one more thing before we move on, that it's a very quick read. The author has included like summaries if you're not a good reader. So if you want to just sort of skip through the book instead of reading the whole thing. So there's little cheat codes to get through the book. And also the audiobook is a very quick, easy listen.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting the ways that we cope with the anxiety around cleanliness too, right? And like, because my thing is like put it in a closet somewhere and close the door, and Peter's thing is like everything in little piles. Like if it's in a pile, that means it's organized, and I'm like, I don't like the piles. There's too many piles. Like we need to get rid of the piles. So it's like it's just a funny dynamic of like how we all try to soothe ourselves in our spaces by like trying to keep things neat and orderly. It might look really different across different, ways that our brains function. The other thing that I'll just remind you, and I know that you probably already know this, but, I just want to also name that like it's impossible to control for everything that's going to overstimulate us or dysregulate us, right? Like, I think sometimes we can like look at diagnoses that we have or things that we've learned about ourselves, and we can say like, cool, now that I know this, I will be able to control everything to an extent that I'll never feel this anxiety, or I'll never feel this trigger, or I'll never feel this overstimulation ever again. And that if we're feeling those things, then somehow we've failed at our healing, our growth, our knowing enough about ourselves. And I just want to remind us that the purpose of this type of work isn't to prevent all of these different stimuli or triggers or whatever it is from happening. It's also about how do we get back to regulation when we know that we've been activated about something, right? And I want to say that it sounds like you are struggling with that piece as well. And so I would encourage you to also think about that too, right? Like, what do you need to do, or how can you notice, or how can you enlist your partner to help you figure out what you're feeling stimulated about so that you can get back to some of that regulation. And to do that in a way that's like, not like, oh my God, there's something wrong with me. I've done something terrible that I'm feeling this way. I should have known better. I should have been doing something else. I should have prevented this. But instead recognizing that like this is part of holding this diagnosis and the way that your brain works or the experiences that you've been through. And that actually it's okay to feel overstimulated sometimes. And there are tools that we're going to use that work well for us to get us back to where we would want to be. And this overstimulation is not a failure. It's actually just a part of the process, right? And that developing those tools is important because we know that we're going to become overstimulated at some point. It is impossible to avoid that. And I know that that can be hard it's hard for me sometimes to think about when it comes to my own like healing journey around my mental health. But I want to make sure that we're continuing to have that conversation about the fact that this is a journey that we're on, and that part of the work is about dealing with or developing the tools to help us get back to where we want to be when we are activated, triggered, or whatever it is by whatever is happening around us. So as you're thinking about cleaning to prevent, I would also think about like, what are the ways that you're going to notice when that overstimulation is happening and find ways to kind of get back to it, whether that's like, yeah, we're just going to put everything in buckets when the overstimulation is happening, or I'm going to go for a walk to get out of this space for a bit so that I can re-regulate, right? Like I can put my feet on the ground and not see clutter all around me, or whatever it might be, right? You know, what are the things that you're going to use that aren't necessarily like, I'm going to clean right now in this moment, but instead like I need to get to a place of regulation so that it will be easier for me to clean. And what are those things that help get you there? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I want to invite the partner in on this and just remind our listener and everyone that like partnership is about problem solving together, and problem solving is inherently about creativity and communication. And so I want to invite your partner in, and I want to encourage you to be having conversations with each other about, well, what are the hard lines? You know, it's like, what do you need help on? What is a trigger for you in your home space so that maybe he can help prevent that? Where are you willing to accept help? It took me several years of my relationship with my wife to feel comfortable with the fact that she will fold my laundry and put it away from me, even though
yeah, that's real.
Even though I want my laundry in a specific place and she doesn't always put it in the right place. I've learned to accept that caretaking because it makes my life easier and it makes our room less messy and it makes me less chaotic, you know, those things. Where can he help? Where are you willing to accept his support? Where are you willing to accept his imperfect support? You know, because like nobody
yeah,
cleans
real.
in the same way. But where are those hard and fast lines that you can be like, yeah, I don't mind when I have 3 projects going at the same time, but when I get into like 6 and then we've got dishes and then we've got this, that's when I get to the tipping point. So if you guys could creatively work together to find out where the parameters are and like I said, creatively problem solve to try to make some of those barriers between you and the care that you need to take care of yourself, to to keep yourself out of overstimulation as much as possible. Not all the time, like Sam said, because that's impossible. But like, what are some barrier hacks or little tricks that you can give yourself together as a team to maybe make changes? And I also just want to remind you that I said earlier, like, you know, this is a part of getting to know yourself. And so I want to remind you that it's okay that you don't know right now. It's okay that you're learning. We're all on journeys with ourselves our entire lives. If we're lucky, we're still learning things about ourselves. And I also want to explicitly say that if you find, you know, if you go on TikTok and there's a hack about, you know, keeping your projects clean or doing laundry and you try it and it doesn't work for you, that there's no morality in it, right? It's just not for you, right? I remember I loved that when I told my friend that like my life was feeling really chaotic and then I needed to put a grasp on it. So I bought myself like a $60 bougie planner to help me like organize my thoughts. And I was really excited about it. And then she goes, And it's okay if the planner doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's okay if
Listen.
that planner doesn't fix all your problems, then you try something else, right? It's
For sure.
not about feeling like a failure because somebody else's tools didn't fit in your hand, you know?
Not all life hacks are for us, you know?
Yeah. Very cute.
All right, friend. Thank you so much for writing to us. You know, I think that like I said at the beginning of this, I really appreciate how much self-awareness work you're doing, how you are enlisting your partner to help you, how he's expressing how that makes him feel. And I just want to name that, like, you know, as you're trying to figure out what it looks like for you to move through the world with this new diagnosis and use different tools or the same tools or new tools, that like this is part of the journey, right? And you're not doing anything wrong because you get overstimulated by the fact that your apartment is messy, right? That's not an indictment on you as a person or on your ability to manage your ADHD. It's just a new thing that you have to navigate. And I really appreciate how much time and care and attention you're giving to this new sort of realization about yourself and how you're enlisting your partner in figuring out what this looks like for the both of you. I think that's really beautiful.
Yeah, me too. We hope this helps, and we love you.
Thank you so much for listening and for writing. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. If you would like more content from us, or if you would like access to our monthly office hours, you can support us on Patreon. If you support us on Patreon for as little as $5 a month, you'll get an additional bonus weekly episode, as well as access to all of those office hours. That's patreon.com/justbreakuppod.
You can slide into our DMs, send us your favorite relationship memes, but most importantly, you can submit your questions about all matters of the heart at justbreakuppod.com, which is also where you can find our merchandise.
Please remember to like, follow, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating and review. This literally keeps our mics on and helps us reach more broken-hearted souls who need two random strangers giving them relationship advice.
Just Break Up is a production of Duvid Media, original music, recording, editing, producing, all magical things by our good friend Spencer Worth Davis. Make sure to check out his podcast and his music. And remember, life is about data collection. It's about experimentation. It's about a willingness to be creative and vulnerable, and to learn as we go. Rumi said, and you, when will you begin that long journey into yourself? And if all else fails,
Just break up.